They found themselves lying on the grass outside of their clubhouse, staring at the blue sky overhead. It was Saturday, so they didn't have any school that day. Because of this, the Cutie Mark Crusaders had agreed to meet at the clubhouse to try out some new ways to earn their cutie marks. However, Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle found themselves waiting for Apple Bloom to arrive, so they could begin their escapades for the day.
How much longer?
Scootaloo asked as she stared blankly at the sky.
A little while, I hope,
said Sweetie Belle.
She just has a few chores to finish up around the farm. When she's done, she'll meet us here. At least, that's what she said when I went to go get her.
Scootaloo moaned in annoyance and rolled on to her side.
What are we even doing here anyway? Why can't we just wait at the clubhouse?
Because there's nothing to do there,
explained the unicorn filly.
Since it's such a nice day, I figured we could wait for her out here.
There's a lot less for us to do out here, you know,
said the annoyed Pegasus as she rolled onto her back again.
I'm so bored.
Oh, come on, it's not so bad.
Speak for yourself.
After that, the two fillies stared at the sky in silence, watching a few clouds begin to roll by. When Sweetie Belle saw the puffy white pillows in the sky, she smiled and stared at them, turning her head a little to investigate one in particular a little more. When she did, the smile on her face grew a little bit wider.
Hey, Scoots!
She said, pointing a hoof at the cloud for her friend to see.
Look at that cloud!
Scootaloo stared at it for several moments, not sure why she was staring at a cloud in the first place. Several seconds went by before she directed her attention to her friend, an eyebrow raised in mixed confusion and annoyance.
It's just a cloud, Sweetie Belle,
she said flatly.
What's so special about it?
Tilt your head to the left,
the little white filly instructed. Rolling her eyes, Scootaloo did as she was instructed and cocked her head to the left. When she did, she looked at the cloud again. Her feelings for it didn't change, as she stared at it blankly. She quickly glanced over at Sweetie Belle, who was staring at the cloud with a smile on her face. Scootaloo looked back at the cloud, the same look as before still there. This time, she squinted her eyes, hoping to see whatever it was her friend was looking at. After seeing several seconds of seeing nothing but a white cloud slowly rolling past, Scootaloo said,
It still looks like a cloud to me, Sweetie Belle. What do you see that I can't?
Letting out a small giggle, Sweetie Belle said,
Don't you see it? It looks just like a bunny!
Wide-eyed and full of surprise, Scootaloo looked at the cloud again. Tilting her head again, she looked at the outline of the cloud. She couldn't really see any resemblance between a furry animal and the cloud, but she tried nonetheless.
I don't see it,
she said, raising an eyebrow again.
It doesn't look anything like a bunny.
Sure it does,
giggled Sweetie Belle as she pointed her hoof at it, outlining certain parts of it.
See? That part there is the head. There's the long ears, and right there is the legs. Do you see it now?
Again, Scootaloo squinted her eyes at it, and focused her attention on where the white filly had pointed out. As she did, the look on her face relaxed a bit, and a small flicker of a smile came across her mouth.
You know, it does look kinda like a bunny, doesn't it?
She said, looking at her friend.
I told you it did,
said Sweetie Belle as she smiled back at her. Silence dawned on the two of them as they stared at the sky some more, staring at the clouds above them. Now that Sweetie Belle had mentioned something to do, Scootaloo wasn't as bored as she nearly was 10 minutes ago. So, the two of them found themselves staring at the clouds some more, determining the looks of each one that passed them.
Oh, what about that one?
Asked Scootaloo as she pointed a hoof in the air.
What does that one look like to you?
Sweetie Belle stared at the cloud her friend had pointed at, looking at it from an angle her head would allow. Soon, she smiled and said,
It looks like a spaceship!
Scootaloo raised an eyebrow at her, turning her head to face her.
A spaceship? It's clearly an ice cream cone, Sweetie Belle.
The white filly blinked twice at her friend before redirecting her attention back to the cloud. She tilted her head from left to right, narrowing her eyes as she did. After a few moments of investigating, she smiled and nodded.
You know, you're right. It does look like an ice cream cone. Silly me, thinking it was a spaceship.
The two of them let out a laugh before they directed their attention back to the puffy white cotton balls in the sky. They watched as they slowly made their way across the blue sky, almost as if they were slowly being pulled by some imaginary string, slowly and gently. The two fillies could only smile as they watched the two clouds begin to merge with one another, making a different shape entirely.
What do you think that one looks like?
Asked Sweetie Belle as she pointed to the newly formed cloud. Scootaloo tapped her hoof on her chin, trying to decipher what the shape of the cloud was. She turned her head left and right, narrowed and widened her eyes, and shifted from her left to right. She even sat up and looked closer at the cloud, trying her best to make out what the cloud was. No matter how hard she tried, she just couldn't figure out what the cloud looked like. Eventually, after several minutes of looking at it from every angle she could possibly muster, Scootaloo threw her hooves in the air and said,
Ugh, I give up. I can't tell what it is.
Sweetie Belle let out a small giggle, catching the attention of the orange Pegasus.
Don't you see it?
She asked, suppressing a giggle as best as she could.
It looks just like you.
Scootaloo's eyes widened as she slowly turned her attention back to the cloud. She stared at it for what felt like an hour, trying her best to see the resemblance between herself and the white puffy cloud above them.
I really don't see it, Sweetie Belle,
she said, looking confused at her friend.
Don't you see it?
The unicorn filly asked as she sat up with Scootaloo. Then she pointed a hoof at the cloud and continued.
Right there's your head, there are your wings, and there's your tail.
Scootaloo decided to look at the cloud again, still skeptical that the cloud looked anything like her. She focused on the spots she pointed out to her, adjusting her eyes so that she could see what Sweetie Belle meant. All the while, she kept her own image in mind, trying to plaster herself on the cloud to see if there was a match. When she did, she stared at it, her eyes slightly more widened as they were before. Shortly after that, a smile had found its way across her face.
You know something?
She said, turning her head to face Sweetie Belle.
I think I see it.
Really?
Asked Sweetie Belle, her eyes beaming and a smile across her face.
Yeah, I could see me in there. It looks a little disoriented, I must admit, but if you really look, it does look like me.
The two fillies let out a laugh at Scootaloo's statement, cupping their hooves around their mouths to try and suppress the laughter as best as they could.
What's so funny?
Asked a voice from beside them. When the two of them looked up, they saw that Apple Bloom was approaching them, a smile on her face.
There you are, Apple Bloom,
said Scootaloo.
I was beginning to wonder when you'd show up. What took you so long anyway?
Sorry about that.
Said the yellow filly.
I got caught up with my chores is all. Now that they're all done, we can go crusading just like we agreed.
The two of them nodded at Apple Bloom and began to make their way to the clubhouse. However, they noticed that Apple Bloom wasn't walking with them. When they saw this, they stopped their trotting and stared at the Southern Earth pony.
What's wrong, Apple Bloom?
Asked Sweetie Belle.
What were you laughing about earlier?
We were just looking at the clouds. Sweetie Belle said that the one right there looked just like me.
She pointed a hoof at one in particular and continued.
I didn't see it at first, but after a closer examination, I could see it. Well, sort of.
Wasting no time, Apple Bloom looked up at the cloud that the orange Pegasus pointed at. She too let out a small giggle.
You know, it does kind of look like you, Scoots.
She said,
And that one right there looks like a turtle. Sort of. You know, this is actually kind of fun.
The Cutie Mark Crusaders let out a laugh together. Then, the three of them sat together on the grass and continued to watch the small white clouds roll past through the sky.